This is genoboost from Game Music for All, and to celebrate 10 years of the Nintendo Wii, I'm going to count down the top 5 Wii game soundtracks. There's no shortage of unique, high-quality soundtracks for the Nintendo Wii. Both Nintendo and third-party games feature many memorable soundscapes, but I've narrowed it down to my 5 personal favorites, including some of the best themes from each title. I also decided not to include any Super Mario games, namely the Super Mario Galaxy series, nor my favorite series, The Legend of Zelda. Those titles are pretty much a given. Number 5, Kirby's Epic Yarn. Everything about Kirby's Epic Yarn is sweet and colorful. It feels like chugging a pitcher of Kool-Aid every time you play. Instead of the usual HAL-produced Kirby, this game was created by the relatively unknown Good Phil Studios. Kirby's Epic Yarn is still a platformer, but the gameplay is quite different from the inhalable power-up based gameplay of the Kirby series. Good Phil's resident composer, Tomoyo Tomita, would similarly add his own twist on the music of the Kirby series. This led to an almost completely original collection of music for the game. Every stage of Kirby's Epic Yarn is accompanied by playful piano-led arrangements that capture the childlike atmosphere of the game. There are many standout tracks in Kirby's Epic Yarn: the over-the-top piano and drums of Dusk Dunes, the memorable intro music, or the rearrangement of Green Greens created by veteran Kirby composers Hirokazu Ando and Jun Ishikawa. The standout track for me, though, is the background music that accompanies the stage Lava Landing. If music can sound like the slowly rolling flow of lava, well, this is it. Number 4, Mad World. Of course Mad World makes this list. Say what you will about Sega, but they have continuously created the most eclectic and genre-defined soundtracks in video games. Mad World follows a lead set by other Sega classics like Sonic, Jet Set Radio, and even Shenmue. Mad World tried a lot of ideas, and I am thankful for that. I mean, how many games tell the tale of a black and white murder spree as commentated by noted comedian Greg Proops and voice of Bender John DiMaggio, all while a surprisingly hot fire of a hip-hop soundtrack bumps as the deep red of blood splatters all over the screen. This game also has the very high distinction of being one of very few games with a hip-hop soundtrack. And it's a full hip-hop soundtrack too, no novel one-off track, but an entire soundscape of dope MCs over beats by Platinum Games composer Naota Tanaka. Needless to say, such a soundtrack has made quite an impact on me. If I have to choose a standout track from the Mad World game, it has to be Sick YG's rhymes from Look Pimpin', the perfect theme to being forced to fight for your very survival by taking part in a cruel but popular game to the death.
You see my swag, now you wanna come and give me all this drag. I think you better back, because my hand is itching to give you a smack. What's your name again, Jack? It's the end of the road and ain't no turning back. Don't let the fly taste fool ya. Matter of fact, it's about time that I school ya. Don't worry, I'm not in a hurry. I don't even want to get my fresh gear dirty.
Number 3, Donkey Kong Country Returns. Donkey Kong Country Returns was a surprising return to form for the DKC series thanks to the brilliant minds over at Retro Studios. If you are listening to me talk about video game music, then you are likely to be familiar with the classic Donkey Kong Country soundtracks for the Super Nintendo, originally composed by David Wise, Evelyn Fisher, and Robin Beanland. Donkey Kong Country Returns not only redefines the Donkey Kong-based platformer for a new generation, but also reimagines classic Donkey Kong Country themes in glorious new fidelity. The soundtrack is filled with a variety of instruments which fill in the rich big band arrangements of classic Donkey Kong Country music. A variety of composers, including Metroid's Kenji Yamamoto and Minako Hamano, took the spirit of the original synth compositions and brought them into the latest century. Much of the original Donkey Kong soundtrack is reimagined in this game, including this infectious jazz hall remix of Mind Menace, but that nostalgia never felt strongest as when I heard the genre-spanning rearrangement Palm Tree Groove. Number 2, Resident Evil Darkside Chronicles. I've had my ups and downs with the Resident Evil games, but I've never had a beef with the stellar music that accompanies the series. The rail shooting action of Resident Evil The Darkside Chronicles is no exception. Composers Shusaku Uchiyama and Takeshi Miura were able to take many of the classic themes of Resident Evil and give them just the right spin to create heart-thumping anthems perfectly suited to the constant action of Darkside Chronicles. Never has a rail shooter had creepier or classier music, thanks to sweeping orchestral arrangements and experimental fusions of sounds and moods. This is true for pretty much any game with a great soundtrack, but Resident Evil Darkside Chronicles conveys this idea best. Thanks to the highly scripted nature of on-rails shooters, there were some very moving moments when the music and visuals combined and swelled in the most harrowing moments of the boss fight. I had no idea that what I really wanted in an epic boss battle with a biological abomination for the fate of the world are the evocative sounds of a rich and full orchestra. This soundtrack is lengthy and eclectic with lots of highlights such as Queen, which we are hearing right now. Other standout tracks for me are Theme of Alexia Type 2 and my personal favorite, the final boss theme, Blood Judgment. Number 1, House of the Dead, Overkill. I can spend quite a bit of time listing off all the reasons I believe House of the Dead Overkill to be close to a perfect video game. One of the greatest reasons for my strong support of the game is the original and fitting soundtrack. John Sanderson and Nadim Daya had a tall order create the soundtrack to a schlock-filled prequel to the arcade classic House of the Dead. Also, the game takes place along the southern United States during the 1970s, with each stage presented as a series of classic grindhouse films. The background music perfectly supports the world of House of the Dead Overkill, while still keeping the action-packed tempo for an arcade shooter. There is a lot of funk and a lot of grit, the very things I feel are most missing from many game soundtracks. Any major game will have highly polished and well-arranged music, but it's hard to imagine many game developers really considering the type of music necessary to fit their game world. Of course, not many game developers are creating gritty rail shooters based on low-budget horror films. The developers and composers at Headstrong Games seem to have a clear aesthetic in mind for House of the Dead Overkill, and were able to achieve it. There is a lot of heart in the soundtrack, and the entire game feels richer as a result. The fact that the composers of House of the Dead Overkill even went as far as to create vocal arrangements to enjoy between stages shows how far they took the idea of creating that classic 70s pop music sound. Standout tracks would be the currently playing boss battle theme, Mother, the other boss theme, Creeper, and the entirety of the aforementioned vocal arrangements, including the title track, House of the Dead Overkill.
Track you down and hear the truth coming straight from you. Never knew where you had run your only son. The child you never knew I could have been so wrong. And the only thing I'm sure I wish I never cared. If you did, you wouldn't try to be there.
If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe over at youtube.com/gamemusicforall or on Patreon at patreon.com/genoboost, and be sure to follow me on Twitter at genoboost. Thank you for watching.